Hello and welcome. Tonight, today, whatever time of day it is for you, we are on chapter 5. So remember, let's get some paper and pencil out, something to take notes with. Let me share my screen with you. All right. How to form a business. One of my favorite topics, something that you need to pay a lot of attention to as you get ready to write your business plan. A lot of information in this chapter will help you do the work you need to do for that. Chapter contents: basic forms of business ownership, sole proprietorship, partnerships, corporations, corporate expansion, mergers and acquisitions, franchises, and cooperatives. The learning objectives cover the following. Number 1, compare the advantages and disadvantages of sole proprietorships. 2, describe the differences between general and limited partners and compare the advantages and disadvantages of partnerships. 3, compare the advantages and disadvantages of corporations and summarize the differences between C corporations, S corporations, and limited liability companies. 4, define and give examples of 3 types of corporate mergers and explain the role of leveraged buyouts and taking a firm private. 5, outline the advantages and disadvantages of franchises and discuss the opportunities for diversity in franchising and the challenges of global franchising. 6, explain the role of cooperatives. Basic forms of business ownership. Sole proprietorship, number 1, something most people start in doing, bottom line. So to own your own business, have a business, and is managed usually by one person. I am a sole proprietor. I have my own business. You have a copy of a business plan that I put together for you to see. It is a good outline and recommended for you to use in putting together the business plan that you will be making, starting with your draft. And then there is a partnership. So this is a legal form, 2 or more people. 2 or more, has to be 2 or more owners. Corporation, 1 person can be a corporation, totally different, but it is a legal entity with authority to act and have liability separate from its owners. That is the most important part about a corporation. When you have liability separate, it's like an umbrella that covers everything. You're under it, but it's not coming out of your pockets anymore. It will come out of the corporation's money. You become separated from the business insofar as liability, which is a wonderful thing, especially if you're working in the services industry and definitely in construction, any kind of big business where there could be a lot of liability or accidents, the trades especially. Forms of business ownership. So we look at this based on sole proprietorship on the left here versus corporations on the right. And we see sole proprietors at 72% in comparison to corporations at 81%. Quite a difference. And within sole proprietorships, they grow into corporations, a lot of them at 20%, and into partnerships at 8%. Whereas with corporations, it's rare that they go back to being a partnership or a sole proprietorship. The advantages of sole proprietorship, there's so many really. Ease of starting and ending the business, of course. You can close the doors anytime you want. You're in charge. You don't owe anybody anything. Being your own boss. A sense of pride in the work you do. Very important when you're a business owner. Leaving a legacy. A lot of times people start businesses so they have something to leave their families, their kids. Um, we see this in so many different areas of activities of businesses where families are brought in. You see this in restaurants, you see this in the trades, even in professionals, organizations. A lot of times you will see families being brought in to work with them and they take over down the road. And of course, number 5, retention of company profits. 6, no special taxes. You just use your Schedule C within your normal 1040 tax return. Disadvantages of sole proprietorships. There are a few here also, but unlimited liability. You are solely responsible for all of the debts that occur with the business. Solely responsible. Comes out of your pocket. Limited financial resources means you're the only person involved, so you're the only place that money can come from. That's a huge problem with sole proprietorships. One of the advantages of partnerships is you have 2 sets of pockets to work from, where here as a sole proprietor, you only have 1 set of pockets. Management difficulties. As the saying goes, it's not good to stay inside your head and only make one decision based on your own thoughts. It's really good to bounce thoughts off of others. That's why partnerships in other ways are more beneficial. You have 2 people involved who can talk back and forth about things. Overwhelming time commitment. It is your life in the beginning. You aren't going to be doing much of anything else. Very few fringe benefits. You are responsible for everything, including cleaning the toilet. You won't have actually even time for thinking about going away on weekends or vacations. It's not about that. It's not about any of that in the beginning, especially until you get some profit happening and growth of the business. Where, just as noted here, disadvantage, limited growth. It's hard to grow a business when you're by yourself. You need employees, you need other people to work with. So growth won't happen very easily. Limited lifespan. It's only around as long as you allow it to happen. You are probably only going to be able to work so long. And if you don't have somebody legacy-wise to hand it off to, it's no longer going to exist. I had mentioned time commitments, and this is something to really think about. How much time do you have to give to the business? Every business owner in the beginning, you could be working 60, 80 hours a week to get going. So the real question is, if you were a sole proprietor, what would you need to do if you wanted to take a week's vacation? Think about that. When could you do that? Who would replace you? As this picture shows, this gal's running a little boutique here, clothing store. She's the only one there. Is she going to close up for a week to go on vacation? We look at the concept of work-life balancing act, and this is really important. How many hours a week are you going to be willing to expend to make a business happen? Are you going to be open from 8 to 5? Well, the doors may only be open from 8 to 5, but what are you doing from 5 o'clock on until 8 in the morning? Are you doing the books? Are you calling other clients? Are you setting appointments? Are you going out and seeing what's going on in the rest of the world so you can build your business? And this is a thing that most people don't think about. 33% work over 50 hours a week and 25% work over 60 hours a week. That's a lot of hours. You got to sleep sometime. Ethnic business centers. Now, in looking at these, we try to look at minority entrepreneurs. And these are the areas where the most exist. And they are San Jose, California, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Seattle, Washington, and Madison, Wisconsin. when you think about these places, what would you think would be the reason that this is very strong ethnic areas? Think about the communities of growth there. San Jose is known for quite a diverse neighborhood today. We have so many different individuals who come there for work, San Jose, Silicon Valley area. And something to think about, Seattle, Washington, is that actually also at a water port where people get off ships? San Jose isn't, Seattle, Washington is. Madison, Wisconsin, it's also an interior city and state, but isn't it off a waterway? Think about these things. Arkansas, Fayetteville, Arkansas, is it near the water? Cedar Rapids. And this is interesting because usually what happens is that more minorities come to areas where they get off ships, trains, and they just stay. They don't know where else to go yet because they are very new to the area, and they just land where they get off. But these are the top ethnic business centers for minority entrepreneurs. Let's talk about partnerships. There are two major types. General partnership, where everything is shared in the operations of the business and assuming liability for business debt. Now, when I say it's shared, there is a decision that is made between the two partners as to who will have what responsibilities and the percentages of ownership. Generally, they start off at 50% in ownership, but that doesn't mean they both do the same amount of work of 50%. So you need to think about this for a moment. What that means is, let's say you came up with the idea of the business, but you need somebody to do the books for you. And that person is willing to contribute to make your business happen. Now it's no longer 50%. You may be getting 80% and maybe they're 20. But that also makes you 80% liable for the business and them only 20% liable for the business. See how that works? And that's how the responsibility factor comes into play here. Need to really consider that. And then when you have partnerships with one or more general partners, the initial partners, and one or more limited partners. Now, limited partners can be even more extreme, where let's say that 20% person actually doesn't do any work. You do all the work, they're just contributing funding. See how that works? And they are still responsible. Now, that does not mean they are a total silent partner, unless it's agreed upon that they will be a silent partner. That has to be an agreement that should be done in writing, the same as the limited or general partnership. So it lays out who's responsible for what and the percentages of those relationships. Now, looking again at the general partner, they have definitely initially unlimited liability. They better have deep pockets then. The limited partner, just the investing one, doesn't have to worry about any management or anything else. And this is like a silent partner. And as mentioned before, part of the limited liability of that relationship. There are other forms, a master limited partnership, and we don't see a lot of these MLPs. They look like a corporation, act like a corporation, and they have stock that is traded on the stock exchange that is taxed like a partnership. So it avoids corporate income tax and incorporation costs and responsibilities. Something that can be very beneficial to a business. But you don't have the corporation insurance coverage that removes the partners from responsibility. It's still the partner's responsibility for liability issues. Whereas remember, the corporation, you don't have that come to the people, it goes to the business. All right, limited liability partner. This one we hear about all the time, an LLP. And this is where it's really all about the fact that it's totally on those owners who are fully responsible for everything. Now, we also consider the fact that they're also responsible for employees and anything they do. So if I have an employee that messes up on something, goes to a job site, let's say I'm in IT, that was my industry for 23 years. And I send out an employee to do some work there and they crashed the server. They made a mess of the network system and they come back on me and say, you're responsible for this because they worked for you. So that means I have to pay for cleanup. Maybe new hardware, maybe new software, all the time it'll take to rebuild the servers or get the new equipment running. Whatever the cost may be, it's on me now. Something to be considered. Now, there's some great advantages of partnerships. Just the water here. As I briefly mentioned earlier, more financial resources. The more of the partners, the more financial resources available. That means if I need a loan, I could go out and get it. But now if you have 3 more people with you, you have 3 more people who can go get loans, which is wonderful. Whomever the party is that they're getting it from, it's a different story. But it also gives you more credibility as a partnership because you're working with other people. And big businesses, this is how they get banks to give more loans, is by being in a partnership. The banks see you as an organization that is growing and working with others. Of course, now you have more management people to work with, ideas, we call it management, and pool complementary skills. As I suggested before, let's say I'm in IT, I need somebody to do the books for me, I don't have time to do that. Well, they're complimenting me, being complimentary for me by having the skills to do the accounting. Or let's see, I need somebody to do my wiring, or I need somebody who's better in sales, or I need somebody who's better in marketing. There we go. I am now bringing people on board who will also be able to do work they enjoy, and I can still do the work I enjoy, and we can work better together to make a business grow. In the end, we have longer survival. The business will last a lot longer. There are no special taxes still. We are still on 1040s and Schedule Cs, which is wonderful. We don't have to pay those corporate taxes. But then we have the disadvantages. Okay, we still have the expense of debt, which is still in existence. If one person doesn't pay it, the rest of us do. If they don't pay their percentage, that means the other individuals will be responsible. Now, depending on how we set up percentage-wise is how to break down the division of the profits. So if I am at 80%, and let's say I have a 10 and 10, they only get 10% and 10%, and I get 80% of the profits. That means we have to work even harder for them to be able to have a good wage earning job, to make good money to pay for shelter, food, basic comfort, living expenses. So our profits need to be able to grow. Sometimes that won't work always in the beginning. It's a lot of work getting going. We will have disagreements. All partners have disagreements. Sadly so. We will argue over the simplest things: when to pay bills, when to go see a client, when to not do something for a client, when to add a new client, when we need more marketing, when we need somebody to come in and maybe reorganize us. That can happen a lot. And we have to spend time discussing these things, which can grow into bad disagreements. Then, of course, difficulty of termination. One person may want to walk away, but let's say 2 other ones don't. Maybe there's even 4 or 5 partners. That can be difficult because this business is maybe, yes, paying for each of us to be surviving, to have that income to take care of ourselves. So if one person walks away, hopefully we can find a replacement, but that may not mean we can terminate the business. That has to be an agreement amongst everyone, and that should be something actually that should be in the original partnership agreement. If something comes to a certain point where there's so much difficulty, or let's say your finances are falling below a certain level of profitability, your income, you need to decide when would be a time to say, okay, it's time to close the doors. That's something that needs to be considered. So let's think about what it means to choose a business partner. These questions you should always ask yourself. And I would highly recommend you look these over really seriously. Make notes about these. Number one, do you share the same goals? Two, do you share the same vision for the company? Three, what skills does the person have? Do they complement yours, as was discussed? What can the person bring to the business? Now, we also talked about them having complementary, but maybe they also have a network of individuals that they work with that you need, and that will make a huge success in your business. That doesn't mean you'll get to use all of them, but sometimes all it takes is one or two that can really blow into a wonderful opportunity for the business. 6, what type of decision maker is the person? Do they make decisions well? Do they take too long to make decisions? Are they controversial in decision making? Do they question how you're going about things, insofar as being controversial? There's all kinds of things that go with decision making, and you want to know that you have somebody that you can sit down with and lay your cards out and discuss things, so that you are not always left in a lurch insofar as decision making goes. You both need to be able to know that when you ask somebody how they feel about this, we need to buy this, we need to market that you can discuss it and make it happen. If there's too much work, this may not have been a great idea. And see, is that 6 or 7 here? Okay. Do you trust each other? Trust, huge. When you ask somebody to pay the bills, you want to believe that they're going to pay them. Or when you ask them how much money you have in the bank and they tell you, you want to believe them. When they say they are going to pick up supplies for you, you want to believe that. When they say that so-and-so called for you, you want to believe in them. So you need to be able to trust one another. Next, does a person respond to adversity? There can be all kinds of things that can happen. Somebody come in that you've never heard about before, but maybe one of the other partners knows about something going on. They're really upset about something and they want to change everything that's being worked on. Are you capable of changing? Are you willing to allow those kind of activities to occur without it being a big deal? So you need to be able to walk through adversity and challenges. Does he or she try to solve the problem or to defend his or her ego? And if ego is what it's all about, you're not going to get anywhere with the person. If they're constantly worried about how they look, and I'm not talking about physically, but with pride and abilities, you're going to spend more time trying to figure out how to make things work than you are to solve a problem. Nobody needs that. So pay attention to that one. Can the person accept constructive criticism? There are times when we need to be told what we're doing is not working well and how it needs to be looked at in an honest way. That means if I need to say to somebody, you aren't doing the job the way you should be, this is what needs to be done, I need to be able to have them hear me and not take it personally. We know people who wear their emotions on their sleeve, and they're very thin-skinned, and I have been known to be that way at times in my younger years. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but the thing is that you need to be able to hear how things need to change if you want to grow and help the business grow and not take things too personally. So be open to constructive criticism. It's actually worth it in the end. And to what extent can you build excitement into the partnership? So a partnership should also be fun. It should be something you get excited about working with someone, not something you drudge and hate to go to work with that person about. It should be times that you also do plan to do things outside the business together. So there's some fun in that. Um, maybe, more than donuts and coffee in the morning, but there will be times where you really need to be able to joke with one another. You need to have some humor, and humor lightens a lot of things up. It makes it easier a lot of the time. Conventional C Corp. This is the one we hear about the most. It is a state chartered legal entity. It's you have an authority to act and has liability separate from its owners. As I noted earlier, it's stockholders. Now, to become a conventional C Corp, you need to file paperwork with the state, more specifically here in California, the state of California. You have to request a name. You need to complete several forms and pay a fee. The starting fee used to be $1,000. That was probably about 10, 15 years ago. I haven't actually had to do that. I did do it once before I was incorporated. It is much more now. When I say much more, I think it's 1,500. So something to be considered. Do you have 1,500 to give to the state of California to start your corporation? That's just the beginning, because now you have to get your books, your corporate books, filing all the fees that go along with that. So you're probably looking closer to 2,000, 2,500 by the time you're done getting started. So you have quite a few advantages here. Limited liability. No longer is you as a human being now responsible for that business. It goes into the corporation. All the paperwork goes into the corporation. The bills go into the corporation. Ability to raise more money for investment, and banks, credit bureaus, all kinds of places, I should say, investors all look at corporations in a different way than partnerships or sole proprietors. And they're more willing to loan you money because you'll have insurance liability that'll cover it. Size, you will always be much bigger generally. I mentioned one person could be a corporation, which is true, but you will probably hire people and that it'll grow. It'll have perpetual life. A corporation stays alive for so much longer after you have even passed, as long as all the paperwork is continued. There's no reason for the corporation ever to die. The only way it would really die is if somebody went into bankruptcy and had to close the business totally. Now, one of the other disadvantages, there's extensive paperwork, double taxation, 2 tax returns. I jumped to size, excuse me. Difficulty of termination. It's expensive to shut down a corporation. You have to pay all your taxes, your employees, before you get to pay yourself or anyone else. And then you could have conflicts with stockholders and board of directors. There are so many more people involved than as a sole proprietor or as a partnership. These are different concepts you really need to take a look at. So as I noted, anyone can become a corporation or have a corporation, but you can't have stock that goes outside of the group. It stays inside the corporation. And of course, you have more limited liability and possible tax benefits. When we look at tax benefits, everybody who has a business has the ability to write things off. It's how you write them off and how you categorize things. That's an important aspect of it, plus the kind of corporation that you are. If you are a for-profit corporation, which the majority are, you're looking to make money. As a result, that means that you are also going to be having a lot more expenses as a result of needing to buy things to make the business run. You have general expenses, you have office expenses, you have equipment expenses, all those kind of things are write-offs. Both sole proprietors, partners, and corporations can write them off, but corporation write-offs actually are larger. You can include many more things that you can't when you're a smaller business, because you won't have the money that the bigger businesses have. Okay, S corporations. It is a unique government creation, definitely. It is taxed like a sole proprietorship or partnerships. It's much more low key, but you also still have shareholders and directors and employees. They have the benefit of limited liability, which is very nice. And you want that. And then only profits are taxed at the personal income. And we hear a lot of people who get a mailbox in Nevada and get an S corporation there. They didn't have taxes the same as California, and so it reduced their personal taxation. We see that happen a lot. Now, there's some guidelines, qualifications for S corps. Number one, no more than 100 shareholders. No more. Shareholders that are individuals of the states and who, as individuals, are citizens or permanent residents of the United States. So if they are not a permanent resident or are not a shareholder, then they can't be in the S corp. You can only have one class of stock and it can never be changed. And you cannot be deriving more than 25% of income from passive resources. Passive resources meaning, like, let's say you own property that you rented and you are receiving income from that source. That's passive type of income. Now, you will lose your S status for a minimum of 5 years if you don't comply with these qualifications. And believe me, they're very, very strict about these things. They do check on you. Now, limited liability companies, the LLCs, similar to an S corp, which we just discussed, but they do not have the special eligibility requirements. So that changes all that around. Now, maybe instead you'd rather just be an LLC because you don't have to worry if you don't have if you have more than 100, or if you have somebody who's not in the estate or has permanent U.S. citizenship, in your business. This might work better for you insofar as what you would like to do. So advantages that of the LLCs is you have limited liability, like the corporation umbrella. You have a choice of taxation. That means you can do one or the other if you want. You can do your 1040 with your Schedule C, but you can also do the corporate tax return and keep your private business private from the business, the corporation. You have it separate. It's very good to do so that your family is kept in a different way. Now, or yourself, it depends how your finances are. And you should work with an accountant on this, tax attorney, CPAs. Very important to hire somebody to go over this in more detail with you. And then you have what is looked at as known as flexible ownership rules. And that is a part of the decisions, between the partners of that corporation, the limited liability companies. Who's doing what, and then distribution of profits and losses. It could be flexible, it could be different one month to the next. You can decide based on profitability or who's doing what work, how those monies and expenses will be managed. And then operating flexibility. Maybe you have guidelines on how long the business will be around, and who will be doing what in that business. And that's nice. You are not in such a tight situation that everything's black and white. Of course, there are disadvantages. No stock, no ownership is transferable. Limited lifespan, a lot like the sole proprietorship. You have less incentives to do the work. Of course, you have taxes just like everybody else, but it'll be different, especially if you're not putting money aside for taxes. I talk about putting that money on the shelf, just like having capital on the shelf, having money for taxation on the shelf. Two different pools of extra accumulation of monies for different reasons. And then lots of paperwork. There's always paperwork, no matter what kind of business you're running. Now, there's different types of corporate businesses, corporations. And these are just a few of the other ones that are not of the average kind, but they do exist. I think I had too much salt today, too thirsty. All right, alien corporations. Organizations that come into the US to do business here. So we call them are chartered and they're incorporated in another country, but they do business here. So they're an alien corporation. Domestic, in the state in which they are chartered, incorporated. That's a standard C Corp, could be here in California, that's a domestic. Foreign Corp, they do businesses in different states, but they aren't chartered. Then, of course, we have the closed private corps, have stock. Only a few people are part of it, and it's not usually the general public. So it's family or friends, people who are involved in the business only. And then you have the open, and we see this all the time, where stock is being sold to the general public. Quasi-public corporations, these are government-approved monopolies. And we see this like PG&E, Comcast, utilities, it's usually utilities. Professional corporations, just only the ones who do professional services. You see this with lawyers, you see this with medical organizations. This is not about just one person usually. It's usually about a group of people working together, but it's to cover the services those businesses are covering. Always nonprofit. It's never for personal profit. It's all about doing it to help others in one way or another. Multinational. And of course, we've heard of these, a lot of them. We have them all over the world that are even based here in the US, but are global. Now, it's really important to look at the structure, management of a business. So let's say you're one of the owners, the original stockholders. What you're going to do is you're going to elect a board of directors. You're going to, let's say if you're in a partnership or a corporation, you're going to work together to decide who the board of directors are going to be. And usually they're hired and usually they're paid. Very important. You don't see it a lot in nonprofits except for when they're extremely wealthy and then they're paying each other. So here we are, and we look at the officers who help set the corporate objectives, and they select the managers. So these individuals are like the head of the CEO's a C-class division. And then from those individuals, you have other managers who supervise employees, and then the employees. Now, these are the 10 largest private corps in the US. The ones you probably are aware of are Albertsons, Deloitte and Touche, lots of business services, accounting, Price Waterhouse, Bechtel, Ernst & Young Accounting Services, C&S Wholesale Grocers, who also work with Costco. Those are probably the most common ones that you may be aware of as students here. So even the big guys make mistakes, and these are some things different corporations have done over the years, and there's some things to kind of laugh at. And this one may be beyond your years, but Atari, they were so embarrassed by the amount of surplus from a bad game. The copies have been buried in a New Mexican landfill. They wanted to never be found again. But apparently somebody knows where they are and they found them. Blockbuster. And they went bankrupt in 2011 when Netflix came out. When they had a partnership thinking they were going to grow, Netflix took over. Coca-Cola. All right, the drink, the new Coke, lasted only 77 days. It received 1,500 complaints in one day. Not good, not good. Pan Am World Airways, bombing of Flight 103 in 2011. It was blamed on the government, and they filed a $3 billion lawsuit, which was really not smart to do at that time. You know, it was a terrorist attack, and to put it totally on the government wasn't the right. It was the terrorists who were doing things. Pets.com, they came into doing a Super Bowl advertisement. They weren't ready for it. Cost them $3 million. The ad. They ended up going bankrupt because of it. Of course, we know they're still around, pets.com, but they had to rebuild as a result of it. Things to consider. Just because you're a corporation doesn't mean it's always good to lose money, because when you're filing lots of corporate lawsuits or having them filed against you, your insurance goes up. It gets very expensive to be a corporation at times with insurance. All right. So what happens from here is that we have what's known as mergers and acquisitions. Okay. A merger. Two firms coming together to form one. Standard procedure, happens a lot, but we have three different kinds of mergers, and I'll show you a picture here in a moment so you get a visual of this. But the most common is when we have two firms coming together in the same industry. So let's say Coca-Cola and Pepsi came together. Okay, very simple, not going to happen, but that would be a very good example of two firms in the same industry. And then again, we have what's called a vertical merger. They have different strategies in related businesses, and they may be a candy company of one kind with a different kind of candy. But they also make others. So it's not just the drinks, it's more than the drinks. Let's say they make popcorn, but let's say they also make potato chips. See what I'm saying? It's not just a drinkable. Maybe they also do drinks, and there's more different types involved. And then a conglomerate which are totally unrelated, not in the food industry, and let's say it's not even the toy industry, but let's say we put together a food product with clothing. See how extremely different they are? Food and clothing. That would be the joining in two different industries, totally unrelated. So let's take a picture here. Look at one picture. All right, so again, the horizontal at the top. two liquid companies coming together, as I noted, and then the vertical being, well, you use sugar in soft drinks, right? But why not make a sugar product? Perfect. And then totally opposites coming together, a drink and a bag of chips. Great examples for a conglomerate. Acquisition is very different than a merger, right? A merger is a joint decision to come together. But an acquisition is when one comes in and takes over that business. And it's not always a joint decision, they just buy it out, okay? It happens all over the world. Then we have leverage buyouts where they're trying to buy out based on buying up stock. And so let's say, for instance, somebody owns 48%, but they have two other members in their family that own some stock, and there's some people out there who have only 25%. But between you and your other family members, you could have the major ownership of the business by joining together. And that's a leverage buyout. You have some aggressive acquisitions and buyouts where they come in and just sweep the business out without realizing it's happening. And we have that happen all over the world all the time. This is just an example of two companies coming together that merged. And it's interesting, macaroni and cheese, right? Kraft and Heinz. And that's Heinz' little smiley face ketchup on top of the mac and cheese. So what kind of merger is this? Is this vertical, horizontal, or conglomerate? Think about that. Now, one of the greatest kind of businesses to get into today, and I really say that because the responsibility is only at a certain level on you, primarily just to keep it going, keep the doors open and employees working, because they have an established clientele, most franchises. We've seen them all over the place, McDonald's, Carl's Jr., Taco Bell, and those are just the food ones, but there are so many other kinds. We have the vacuum cleaners, we have the cleaning, the carpet cleaning companies, the pest control, so many different kinds of companies with franchise agreements. But the question is how much money do you want to spend to own a franchise? And there are currently believed to be 733,000 franchise businesses in the US, and it employs, look at that, 13.3 million people. Now, of course, we're in the middle of the pandemic. Doors are slowly starting to open. Here we are in June of 2020. It started in really February of 2020 and crashed on us in March of 2020, where businesses were told they had to close unless they were essential. People couldn't work where they were interacting with people, so a lot of businesses failed. People had to close them up permanently. But on the other hand, a lot of businesses just put things on hold. And some of them are franchises because they were working just fine before until they told they couldn't interact with people. And a lot of people were able to survive, which is wonderful. And that means they can be open maybe a little slower. Some businesses haven't been given the full go-ahead just yet. I think some states are in phase 2 or 3 still. Okay, so what makes for the newbies? And these are the most currently known businesses to have started, franchise to have started. Mosquito Joe's Pest Control, as I mentioned. Blaze Fast Fired Pizza. Haven't heard of them. New one. You Break, I Fix, electronic repairs. I've seen that on vehicles. Office Evolution. This is one where they come in and give you, let's say they own a building, and or they don't, or they give you online space. It's a very nice kind of concept so that you can do your business, keep it going. Amanda Senior Care, elder care. We see people who come in and care for people in people's homes. And then there's also homes in themselves where people can go live. My salon suite, Salon Plaza, it's kind of given. Salon suites that are already designed, and you just come in and rent a space. Reality One Group, real estate. I guess it may be an offshoot at some of the other realty, I mean, not reality, realty one group. Apex Fun Run. Have to have these fundraisers for schools, and this is a wonderful one, Apex. And schools need money for music and sports, arts programs. Those are the first to go when there's cutbacks. I love kickboxing, and I have friends that are involved in this one. Personal and group fitness, really good to have activities. And Nectar Juice Bar Inc. That's a brand new one to me. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. I'd love to hear from you and your writings, if you know anything about that one. So when we're financing a franchise, you have to look at the costs involved. And they expect an initial investment from you. Now, if you don't have the money, the cash for deposit or requirement to get the license established in your name, you probably won't be going anywhere. And it can be at all kinds of levels depending on what kind of franchise it is. Some of them are 10,000, 20, 30, 40, but some of them go up to $1 million, and I believe that's like a McDonald's. All right, the advantages of a franchise. Definitely management and marketing assistance. You're given it from the business, the owner of the franchise, in some cases schools, such as McDonald's or Wendy's. They have a school where you go and get trained. Wonderful thing. And of course, you have personal ownership. It's in your name as the manager of that or location. Nationally recognized name. Financial advice and assistance. They give you a bookkeeper. They give you accountants to work with. They teach you how to hire people. So yes, there's definitely lower failure rate as a result of that. But then you have your disadvantages. It's the startup costs, as I noted. You have to share in the profits. You don't get all the profits. You only get a percentage. And that's something that'll be worked out between you and the owner. Management regulation, you have to follow all their guidelines. It's up to them how the business is managed and run. Coattail effects. This is a term that you should be very, very well aware of. If something happens at a franchise down the road, you will get what we call the coattail, the backlash of what happened at that other franchise. The most common one we know of is Kentucky Fried Chicken, or was it also, trying to remember the one where they found a finger or something, or a rat in some food in the beans or something. Well, then all the other Kentucky Fried Chickens were affected by it. Same thing, oh, it happened, I think, at Wendy's also. And they were affected for a while. People shy away from a franchise where bad food things happen. We saw it with Chipotle, with the lettuce, and the people were getting sick. When there was E. coli incidences from lettuce at other stores, not just Chipotle. And it's taken Chipotle a while to come back from that. That's hard to get over. Then you have what's known as restrictions on selling. You are told what you're going to make and what you're going to do. The same thing goes with the carpet cleaners. They can only use certain products they have been provided with to clean carpets with. That's why they are who they are. If you are selling vacuums, you only get to sell that vacuum that you are selling for that company. A Kirby was the most common one. Kirby vacuums goes along with selling insurance. Having a franchise of an insurance company, A lot of people like to be their own brokers. So to get their own company, they have to get licensed and then get approved and given a distribution for a franchise location to own that name, hold the license for that name for that business. They can't do anything else but sell that insurance and the kinds of insurance that they only have available. And you will always have fraudulent franchise who are trying to take advantage of what they have to sell. It just happens. I want to mention something else. Let me go back here for a moment with fraudulent franchisers. What I mean by that is the company who says they have a franchise to sell to you may be hackers or spammers or liars. And that's what that means. I wanted to be more defined about that. So there's no misinterpretation there. That means they're not going to give you the money that you make because you don't have anything really to sell, because it's really not a real deal. They're just, it's a fake business, and they're taking advantage of people and stealing money generally from people. Okay, here we go. Diversity in franchising. Yes, women own about half of US companies right now. But when we talk about franchises, it's only about 30.6%. It's increasing. It was at 18.5 less than 4 or 5 years ago, so it's really increased, almost double. More women definitely are getting into the franchising business. And these are just a few of them. Aunt Annie's, to Decorating Den, Build-A-Bear, all women-based, has started also. Now, there's an organization called Diversity Fran, and this is a wonderful organization. And I want to show you, or maybe I can't right now, I can't change my screen. To go out on the website and check them out for working with minorities. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization. And it's, in some cases, I think, free. You might want to check that out if you're having a need, you think you're not getting support enough. This group of people is wonderful for helping minorities. Okay. And it's considered to be that 20% of franchisors are minority owned. I think it's probably higher. I think this is a low number right now, something I would check. So this is a Wagon Wash, and they've been on TV. Excuse me. We have seen them do advertisements, but what type of service franchise might appeal to you as a business owner? And this is a great example. These guys have a truck they set up, and they go around and they wash dogs. They come to your home and they do it for you. This is a wonderful, wonderful industry, especially if you're good with animals. So it's something to consider. Now, there are different kinds of franchises. Other than going out to the storefront, there's also some that are at home. And of course, there's great advantages, you don't have to commute, you get to see your family more, and definitely the overhead expenses are really minimized. But then you have disadvantages, and you can be isolated from the rest of society. Networking, you don't have as much ability to network with people. And then there's definitely long hours, and you'll have family interruptions. People think that just because you're home, you're available to visit and do things and play, and it can be hard. Then there's this building of a bridge between e-commerce and franchising. And we saw this happen just recently, especially with the retail stores having to close their doors. Businesses have expanded unbelievably to the online avenue of selling their services, their products, or whatever it is, their goods, as a result of the change with the pandemic. And what that has done is more people's home businesses have grown tremendously, actually. We don't hear about people with home businesses actually having as many problems as people with retail right now. Then there are those issues that come up, and online issues where you have to sign an agreement that you will not create another site or have a site that conflicts with your franchisor's site. And you don't want to have that problem anyway. We talk about a non-compete concept, and this is one of those kinds of things where you can cause a lot of conflicts, cause you to have to stop and reevaluate what you're doing with your business. Then we have reverse royalties. Who owns what? And people get confused when you have an online business. Who gets the profits, the royalties, based on who did what work? It's how do you know? Is just by online services? Who's doing the marketing when somebody walks in and to an online situation, they're not talking with a person any longer. So there's no more, well, that salesperson went out and took care of this and they should get the credit for it. And that's where there's a lot of difficulties here on who's getting to make the money. The employees or the franchisees aren't getting to make the money that they used to make, where the franchisors are making the money. So there's a conflict there that probably have to be resolved more so now, especially with us being in the pandemic. Technology. If you are not up on your technology use, you need to be. It is extremely, extremely important in today's world. It will help you grow business-wise and personally. That's all I can really say. I mean, there's not much more to it than that. If you want your business to grow, know technology. If you don't know it and you're not good at it, hire somebody who is and who can explain things to you. Don't be afraid to ask for that. That's one of the great things of partnerships. You may have one person who's really technically good and another person totally technically challenged. Okay, that technically challenged person isn't going to be doing that work. Pretty obvious there. But you got to be up on social media, so you need a person who can help with that for you. And you may have to hire somebody who does just that. Now you have to be able to grow your brand in that way. Once you become more socially adapted with the media out there, then you can grow your brands pretty easily. And it'll make your business grow. As we've seen, whenever you're doing virtual businesses, you will always be doing global markets. But the thing is you have to know how to address global markets. They could be much different. If you are a franchisor, as we have seen, we have grown globally. I'm going to tell you right now, I went to the Middle East when I was 17, 18. That was just a few years ago now. Okay, so it was over 40 years ago. Okay, I'm dating myself now. All right, maybe even longer than that. And maybe 45, almost 50 years ago. And when I was there, I had a Coca-Cola and I had McDonald's. They were already there in the Middle East, but they changed the containers to read in English and in part, and I was in Israel, and they had Hebrew on the bottle in Coca-Cola, and they had American on it. So we knew, I mean, we know what the bottle of Coca-Cola looks like, right? Has that certain shape, it has the ridges in it. but we don't know what's in it until we read what's on it. And so they have to make it work for the different countries. Now, they also had this at McDonald's, they had the hamburgers and all, but they also had Israeli food there for hamburgers. And it was very different, not the same. I mean, we had some choices, but they also made it so it worked for that country. And they continue to do that. And very important to do that. Then there's been the growth with other kinds of organizations like Kumon Learning Centers and H&R Block. We didn't have those in other countries before. There's some issues that could be problems. Kumon is great for learning languages or STEM education and learning how to take tests. But H&R Blocks is about taxes. So now you have something you need to really think about. If you are going to own a tax company in a different country, you will now have to learn the taxes for that country, and you have to know their exchange rates and all the different laws for taxes. So there's a lot of work involved if you go international with a business that is normally just here in the United States. Top home-based franchises. And I always like this one, Snap-on Tools. They're great. They'll come right to your house, their business, to sell the products to you. It's awesome. Jan Pro, I don't know of them. I know Serve Pro, disaster restoration, but Jan Pro's a new one to me. Cruise planners, they've been around for years. Vanguard Cleaning Systems, a good one. I've heard that up and coming. Annie's Pretzels, definitely. Matco Tools, not a brand new one, but it's definitely growing. And that all of these are out of the home. You know, they do not have storefronts. ChemDry, definitely well known, and they do really well. Budget Blinds, home decor, you know, the curtains right here. These aren't budgets though, but those are kind of that they do also. CleanNet USA, and again, a commercial cleaning company. And then when you look down this list, you see here what, 1, 2, 3, 4 commercial cleanings. And that means people love to do this kind of work, and it's growing. And there's something to be said for that because you just work out of your house. You don't have to have a storefront. The best 10 high-performing franchises, and we all know 7-Eleven's number one, and of course McDonald's. Interesting that 7-Eleven is ahead of McDonald's, but 7-Eleven sells so much more than McDonald's, right? Dunkin' Donuts, the UPS store, they have grown in leaps and bounds for what they do for people. Jimmy John's, I don't know Jimmy John's. Somebody has to tell me about that. Dairy Queen, food, great ice cream. Ace Hardware, been around all my life that I know of. The Wingstop, really good food. Sport Clips, definitely great. And Remax. I was mentioning the real estate organizations before. Remax is just continuing to grow in leaps and bounds in the real estate industry. Now, one of the kinds of businesses we have that are not really talked about a lot are cooperatives. And it's usually a really nice kind of thing. There's a place called the Brownstone in Benicia, and that is known as a cooperative. So you have a building, and they all come together inside to pay for the use of the building. Now, you may only have a little 10 by 15 foot square area to use. Maybe you're a cosmetologist, you do nails, you're on your own, but you're all there to help pay for the services of that building. And it's really a great thing. This is how the farmers used to be. This is how markets used to be. and in some cases still today. And they talk about how worldwide co-ops serve 1 billion members. It's very important to do to help each other work together to be able to have a business that can grow under one roof with others. And the bottom line is it's a democratic management. So they have a board of directors and they have a professional management team that helps all these businesses work together under that roof. So here we are at the end of chapter 5, sorry. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, text, or show up at my Zoom office hours. And you might also want to check in with your peers or do some extra research about any questions you may have about this chapter, and looking forward to seeing you in chapter 6. Bye.